Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first Town Council Budget Workshop for Thursday, April 21st. If you will please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll move on to public comment. This portion of the meeting is specifically set aside for comments from the public who are asked to limit their comments to 2 minutes. Any person interested in providing public comment but cannot attend the meeting should email their written comments to publicmeetings@rockyhillct.gov. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to be heard? Moving on to budget review. Up first, we have human resources and legal compliance, which you will find on pages 14 and 15. Yep.
We adjusted the agenda
Yes, we did.
to talk about the flag.
Okay. Sorry, we're going to adjust the agenda. I don't have that on my agenda.
Yeah, that's what.
Do you want to make do you have it on your agenda?
I do not, but I know it's on there, so. I mean,
Okay.
Would you like a motion
No,
to?
no,
It's already
no,
on.
Oh, it's
the
already
agenda.
on there.
It's already on there.
Yep.
You just don't have the
I'm
right
sorry, I just don't have the right agenda.
Okay, a discussion item, possible action, flying the Ukrainian flag at the town hall
Thank you.
was added.
Yes, so this was sent to me, the Ukrainian flag, and apparently we have been asked to fly this by the Ukrainian National Home, obviously to show our support for Ukraine, and surrounding towns have also received a flag. We know of 2, John had made some inquiries, we know of 2 who are flying it. And so we weren't quite certain how do we go about flying a flag if we have the authority to do it. So maybe, John, I'll let you kind of explain
I think
the
this is
flag
the
policy.
first time we received this type of request. And I did check around that Weathersfield, they don't have a flag policy, but Berlin does have one. And Berlin's policy basically says the only 3 flags that they'll fly is U.S., state of Connecticut, and the town if they have one, and so on. But Weathersfield is flying theirs because I believe their town council addressed it at their meeting earlier this week. And I did see a flag flying in Newington, but I didn't hear back from them on any policies that they have or not. So being the first time we got this sort of request, it was more figured it should be brought to the town council level to see if the town would like to fly the Ukrainian flag with the understanding that it has to fly below the U.S., the state, and the town flag. So we could probably put it on below the state flag pole out here if we want to do that, and so on. So, and again, because I can't remember it ever being requested before, there isn't any town formal policy or request form developed at this point in time.
Madam Mayor, can I jump in?
Who said that? From top of the flag.
This is all Sullivan, and I can't see anybody on my screen except myself and the Rocky Hill logo.
Go ahead.
I kind of felt like a spy there. I just.
It's a little creepy to hear someone's voice because we don't know.
Yeah, sorry about that. Is there something that can be done on the technological side so I can see the proceedings? Because I don't see any of you.
Oh, you don't?
I'm not sure, but
It's streamed on the site and the video, and I think maybe on YouTube if you
Probably bring up your YouTube on your cell phone.
But it's probably a delay.
or a different tab.
but I
Yeah.
think would
But I'm on the Zoom though, because I've zoomed in before and it wasn't like this. I was able to see everybody. So I don't know what has happened here. I came in through the Zoom link that was provided to me on the town email.
I'm not sure if it's IT John who knows how to set that up. He typically will set these up for us, and he isn't here this evening, so I'm not sure that
Oh.
we have the capability to split that screen like.
The other John is here.
Oh, but our John
okay.
John Nowakowski is here, and he's going to go see what he can do while we're talking.
Okay.
Do you want to
Well,
comment
well,
on
he's-
the Ukrainian flag though while you're talking?
Yeah, well, while I'm here anyway, now that you know I'm here,
you
so
turn it up?
just a thought. I do believe very strongly that municipalities should not be freelancing in the field of international relations, in that we shouldn't just be writing on a blank slate, supporting one country or not in the realm of international relations, generally speaking. But that said, we have a situation here where our federal government has formally taken a position in support of Ukraine in the current situation. On March 15th, the president signed a bill that had been passed by Congress called the Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act. And that, I think it's fair to characterize that law as a formal expression of support by the United States for Ukraine in that current situation. So, I mean, to my mind, that's a prerequisite before we can even really, or before we should even consider this type of request. But I do feel that that prerequisite is present here. So that said, and so I think that if we do proceed with authorizing the flag, oh, there we go. I think we should make it clear that it's consistent. The intent is to, in effect, echo our national government's lead on this, and it's not just the Rock Hill Town Council, sort of writing on a blank slate.
Do you know if the state, Councilor Sullivan, does the state fly a Ukrainian flag?
I don't know the answer to that.
Does anybody know? Is there one at the Capitol?
I don't know.
Well, we know there's one where Newington, Weathersfield. I don't know where else.
I saw the one in Newington, and I've been told about Weathersfield. Weathersfield town manager said they put it up, and we confirmed with Newington they've been doing it since Tuesday.
Do we have a requested time period?
I don't have a request in this letter. No, this was actually a thank you. And the flag was, I received a thank you letter for doing a proclamation. I can read that into the record if you
Sure,
want.
and so they're not asking for any particular date to coincide with any other flying of it. And I'm also wondering if we could just display it in our lobby for a week, rather than run it up the flagpole.
Flagpole.
But I
think it'd be interesting if we had a policy on this, something we can consider, because there could be other days too. St. Patrick's Days, they fly the flag over the Capitol for Independence Day, other holidays as well. It might be something where if a resident were to fill out, a form or make a request, not an unduly burdensome form, but make some sort of formal request, particularly on an event. Perhaps that could be something that we could look at doing moving forward. I think the duration is always a question. How long do we do it? How long do we take it down? There's also usually these types of requests don't come up in the context of a war. I think it would be a challenge, as Councilor O'Sullivan meant, if we were asked to pick a side, in which case maybe the circumstances were less clear than they are, or at least they appear to be in this conflict. So some things to be considered there. I do think it is it's a little challenging, because when we're flying the flag of a country, it's not just showing solidarity from the people, but it's showing alignment with that particular state and what actions they do. And in a war, awful stuff happens. We're seeing some pretty awful reports of different war crimes that are taking place that we, of course, wouldn't want to be seen as endorsing. But it's who knows where it goes from here. So perhaps if it was a time-bound event coordinated with perhaps some of the folks that we saw come and speak to us today, and then had some sort of other event around it supporting that community, I think that would be maybe more appropriate than indefinitely flying it. But just some things to consider there. It's certainly a very complicated issue, and we don't want to set a precedent that may be, held against us in the future.
Yeah. Oh.
Anybody?
Yeah, I think it probably is worthy of some more discussion and maybe a policy before we do it. And maybe Ed's idea has some merit versus using a flagpole officially. I mean, to take it maybe to the level of perhaps of absurdity, but, what if Russia invaded 4 other countries too? Are we going to, so, I mean, I hope it doesn't get to that level, obviously, but I mean, these are contingencies you have to think of before you just put something in place, unintended consequences. So, I mean, I think pretty much everybody's on board supporting them. It's just we got to figure out the right way to do it that's fair going forward in all kinds of events that happen.
I do think it is reasonable to display it someplace in the lobby or something. I don't know what the size of it is. They haven't opened the packet. But would that be doable, John?
Yes.
All right. Why don't we take a vote on that?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to display the Ukrainian flag for duration, I think, of 1 week from, going up tomorrow and lasting till next Friday, 1 week, and and do it inside the town hall in the main lobby, as opposed to flying it raising it up the flagpole.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion?
Just one question would be, if we wanted to consider pursuing a more formal flag policy moving forward, could we make that as a separate motion within the context of this? I don't know, just procedurally how we would do that in case it
I
comes
think
up
it'd be a
again.
separate motion.
Separate motion?
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Were you in favor?
Bill's in favor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
and I now see the chamber. Thank you.
Okay. All right, good. Chris, do you want to make a motion about a flag policy?
Sure, I'll make a motion that we explore drafting a flag policy that could be used or requested by members of the public to have access to the flagpole for future events.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, good. All right, now we will move on to Human Resources and Legal Compliance, pages 13 and 14.
14 and 15.
14 and 15.
Good evening. Well, is this on? I do. I come bearing good news once again. That good news is that our municipal organization has been recognized again by our insurance carrier as compared to peer municipal organizations of similar size and operating budget. We have once again, from the years 2016 through March of 2022, we have been rated amongst the lowest relative to the numbers of cases and the dollar figures lost when it comes to public officials' liability matters. What are public officials' liability matters? Public officials' liability matters are cases that involve sexual harassment, Americans with Disability Act cases, discrimination, et cetera. Why is that relevant to a budget discussion? It's relevant to our discussion tonight because I come to you tonight asking for more money in my training budget. And I'd like you to understand the very direct connection between the training and the work that we do behind closed doors and in training sessions with supervisors and managers and with employees, and the risk management practices that result in us maintaining that status as having a very low public officials liability case list. This is work that, again, is done quite often behind closed doors or in training sessions, general training sessions, sometimes remedial training sessions that have been customized for a specific person or for particular departments. And once Camille Carney and I have met with folks and have an understanding about what their challenges are, quite often, in addition to working with them as human resources specialist, we end up sending them for reinforcement and for enhancement of their skill sets, 2 different training sessions. I'm going to give you a list of some of those titles so you get an idea about some of the stuff your folks are getting some good information and some good skill building on relative to work climate issues. Classes that address work-life balance and everyday stress, such as managing stress, mental health and wellness in today's workforce, strategies to manage anxiety, being resilient no matter what. Those are some of the titles. Those are some of the intense training sessions that they are going through on a regular basis, depending on what's presented to us when they meet with us in our offices. Classes that address work climate concerns. Listen to the title, Managing Toxic Employees, Disagreements at Work, Surviving a Micromanager. The classes are wonderfully specific. Quite often we can find a class to address the specific issue that we're dealing with, and I can't stress enough that these classes are helping us to help our employees navigate the challenges that they are facing, not just in the workplace, but in many cases at home, and sometimes that ends up in the workplace. We also have classes that have been designed to address the most emotionally damaging and costly for employers. Supervisory anti-harassment responsibility training, workplace harassment and abusive conduct prevention for supervisors. When I come to you asking for more dollars in our training budget, again, we see the results because we see people who get the rules, they understand how to navigate difficult relationships and conversations with each other in the workplace, and we are seeing the results of those trainings on the other side when it comes to an insurance carrier who actually tracks the progress of our work. And you're seeing it in those lower case numbers and those lower figures relative to lost dollars. We are also seeing the results of our training sessions when it comes to dealing with our labor market issues. Right now, we are not an anomaly like other organizations. We have a bear of a time filling vacancies. Recruiting is incredibly challenging. It has been for actually the last year or so, and it's only gotten worse. So more organizations are becoming creative about growing their own, teaching your current people how to do their jobs better or how to expand their skill sets so that we can retain people or so that we can promote from within. And just to give you an example, again, these are all classes that your employees are already taking advantage of. New supervisor fundamentals, supervisors crash course in progressive discipline, communication and working as a team, a workshop on cultivating positive workplace relationships amongst your staff, peer to supervisor. In other words, you're a peer, we want to promote you. There are things you have to learn about. You can no longer be your pal. You can no longer be the pal of the people who you've been peers with for quite some time. Now you're becoming a boss. Again, very specific, very intense training sessions to help us retain good employees. And it's part of our succession planning. We need these classes. We need the increase in the budget so that we can continue this work. You'll also see increases with regard to fees. And that increase is directly related to some of the mandates that we have from the state. We have, as you know, a police accountability bill. We no longer can just do, for instance, a 10-panel drug test, which was $65. We have had to add anabolic steroids to that, $130. So it's now a total of $195 per person. Finally, you'll see an increase in my advertising budget, and that request, again, is related to the labor market change. So that's the story behind the numbers. Any questions?
I had a question. This is actually probably more for John. It's not necessarily just related to your department. But, John, we're going to see this in all the departments. There's new numbers for telephone and photocopier lines that were not provided last year's budget. Can you just talk to everybody about what this stuff's getting reclassed or what's going on
In
there?
the past few years, the telephone, cell phones, and the photocopying expenses were in IT. And so what we're trying to do is spread out the costs of those items from one department to the department where they are. So in the past, they could ask for an extra cell phone for whatever reason, and it wouldn't hit their budget. And then sometimes you get into photocopiers where they may want a colored copier as opposed to just a black and white. So if it is, then the cost of that copier would show up, or the phone, in the appropriate budget. So Mona and Eric split it up, so you'll see a large credit in the IT budget for those two lines, but then the money's been spread out. I think those are the two we moved.
Correct. And fuel,
And fuel.
yes.
And fuel is a smaller one where it'll just go to those departments that have vehicles. And it would be split out from highway department.
So if you took the sum of all the telephone versus what last year in the same photocopier, is it roughly similar?
Exactly. Yeah, it would turn
Okay.
out to be the same. And really what we use is just kind of a 6-month snapshot and looked at usage and averaged it out that way. So of course, as we go forward, we'll look at the actuals against it. But we used a 6-month history to develop what our amounts were that we'd use as a budgeted amount.
Gotcha. Great, thank you.
I got Dana, just on the fees, and I understand what you're saying with the anabolic steroid testing increasing the fees. You just talk a little bit about what the town screening process is, how often we're doing the randoms,
Right.
the new hire piece versus existing employees.
Right. So we've always done the drug screening with regard to our police department at the new hire phase. That has not changed. And now with the police accountability bill, in order to get recertified, our police officers have to go through a drug test process. And so we're getting hit in terms of the new folks coming in, if they haven't had their drug screening, and the current people who are going for certifications.
So the current people, are they getting randoms like the CDL drivers?
No,
Or is it
no.
no. And the CDLs are still randoms?
Yes, they are. They are.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question about the tuition reimbursement and some of the programs that you mentioned. Is that online self-service? And if it is, how do you pick the vendor and judge that they're doing a good job?
So for tuition reimbursement is different. That's contractually driven, and contract by contract, there's a certain dollar figure, depending on whether or not you're going for your bachelor's degree or a higher level degree, that we will reimburse you. Okay. And then in terms of the training sessions, it's a mix. Some are online, many are online, and many of the employees took advantage of the online services, especially during COVID. And then some are live, and some are customized. We have a couple of different vendors that have been vetted by our ESI, our employee services, our employee assistance services vendor, and we have a couple of folks who will come in and do one-on-one training, executive coaching, or remedial level coaching if we have a particular problem in a specific department or with a specific individual.
So those like career development, managing different conversations, transitioning from employee to supervisor, that would be under that training expenses line item?
Correct.
Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. We'll move on to B, economic development, which is pages 36 and 37.
Good evening.
As you know, I'm the economic development director. I work out of the town manager's suite and receive administrative assistance from the town manager's office. And I also provide some customer support for the town manager's office also. I am also a liaison between state and federal and regional resources involving economic development, community development, and also between the chambers of commerce, including the commercial builders, businesses, farmers. My budget, the increase you can see is in fees. That fee category has increased, I believe, $22,000 as a result of
Can I ask that Ray get a little closer to the microphone?
Right? Isn't it scary when you hear the voice?
That's off. The fee category of $32,000 has increased from the previous $10,000 due to the cost for the part-time consultant, the Sonic group that we're using now to coordinate and seek additional grant funds. That cost is now is in my department, and coordination will be through me and the town manager as far as what activities the Sonic group takes for grant seeking. And the other increase would be the telephone, which I have no control over at this point. The marketing budget, I believe, remains the same, as does I believe the subscriptions have increased due to the increase in memberships. Okay, thank you. Any questions you may have? I will try to answer them.
Ray, I guess I'll start. I know we've put the grant writing piece within your budget. What I'd like to do is ask that during the course of the year, we kind of track what the payback is on the grant writing. So we've brought a grant writer in, like to see what we receive in increased grants, to see that we're getting a payback for
Sure.
what we're investing.
That makes sense.
So if we could just kind of track that as return on investment for the course of the budget.
And they will actually, that in their contract, they do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ray, can you talk about the marketing line, for example, through March 1st, incurred $340, still projecting $3,000, looking for an increase to $4,000. Is it a timing thing that amounts get incurred between March 1st and June 30th more, or?
It is a timing thing. I try not to spend money, but we need some money in case we want to do things. And we have been planning to do a more of a regional seminar, so to speak, with commercial realtors and state agencies to bring them in, maybe in the new community center for a large gathering, for maybe a half-day program to discuss, the change in the commercial real estate landscape and how that relates to state and local regulatory agencies and requirements. That would be a larger ticket item. There are other smaller training or marketing training, I guess we can say, that we'd like to do with the chamber. And notably the local Rocky Hill Chamber, and in the future the Middlesex Chamber, to draw them in, so we can, just let people know who we are, what we have, and then utilize their resources as much as we can, their resources being the Middlesex Chamber.
So the event you mentioned, having maybe the community center, is that something that will happen during this fiscal year, you're saying? Or?
We hope so.
Okay.
We hope so.
Great. Thanks.
It's a issue of logistics and timing, and we have to make sure we can get everybody and coordinate schedules between the various players.
Gotcha.
Ray, was there anything either under the fees or the marketing line that could get offset by the ARP funds? Would that be an allowed use?
The Sonic group, what we'd like to have them target, in addition to some of the larger grants, the larger federal grants, they're very good at going after the smaller grants, going through the foundations and the corporate grants. they're very good at seeking out what those different grants are and how they can tie them into a lot of human service activities and community activities that we, as municipal employees, may not really know exist. So that's, for me, that's their main focus right now.
And are we able to offset the cost of either the marketing activities or other fees using some of the funds that we have, perhaps some left over from the business assistance program that we allocated?
I'm thinking that we would be, any type of activities and community activities would be more towards for the Sonic Group would be more community based as opposed to economic development based. Different types of gatherings or, other community service type activities. As opposed to what I'm used to is more, like I mentioned, the more economic development and commercial development resources.
Thanks.
Okay, we're questioned out.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Before
Moving
Bill-
on.
Before Bill asks for something.
Moving on to C, tax collection, pages 20 and 21.
Everybody's gonna have their own tax account and print it out. Broken out.
No, he's appraised.
Fly the flag. And then draft, working draft.
Good evening. I'm Elaine McCann, tax collector. Yeah, I believe the only thing that have gone up was the technology software. That is our program. They raised the prices by 5% this year. This also includes, my postage is also included in there for sending out bills. And we have Accurate, which is one of our skip tracings. Yeah, it's $150 more a month. And if we go over that, it's additional money. Then I have the $600 photocopier. That's my budget's little. Any questions?
Just a quick question. So there's postage in the technology software line as well as in the postage line? Is there different things or?
Yes, because our program's QDS, and it's like a bulk mail, so it automatically, they put the postage in there, so we give them the check. But the other one, for the other line item, it's for here, for my liens or tentative liens, my demands that I send out from here
Gotcha.
in returned mail.
Delinquent tax bills?
Yeah, delinquent tax bills, demand notice, tentative liens, those wonderful little letters.
Councilor Prakash, I just want to say, because you were not here, the photo, I don't know if you know, but the photocopier will show in each of the departments at 100%, and, because I know you have a thing about paper, and also the phones, because we took it out of IT where everything used to be pooled, and now each department.
So we have
has-
it itemized?
Yes,
Okay,
By
thank you.
department.
yeah,
That'll be
Okay.
great.
yeah. Okay.
Thank you for,
Yeah.
asking about that. Whoever did.
Jeff Levine, I
That was
think.
great. Looking out for you, fun.
Because I called you, you remember.
That's right.
All right, any questions?
There's an item here on technical supplies that mentions, it looks like the cost has transitioned from the state to the town, or some of the costs have, around election day, I guess, overhead, for lack of a better term. Could you talk about what's involved in that line and then how it's transitioned from the state to the town for technical supplies?
Technical supplies. That's that's the technical supplies. It's for our bills and forms that I send out for the delinquent notices. And also it's for the receipts tapes.
Chris, are you thinking of the registrar?
Yeah.
Yep, I might be
Yeah.
wrong.
Page ahead of you.
State
20 and 21.
2021.
I didn't want to say
Want
that.
an itemized list of your technical
No, I appreciate
supplies.
I'll look
Didn't
at her
wanna be
face and like,
rude and say it. I'm never making a mistake. You're making me nervous.
This
Well,
is
you
what
have
happens
to
when you
answer
copy
it
off someone
now.
else's notes.
Any other?
2021.
That was a good answer.
Yeah.
I know. I didn't want to be
Nailed it.
like, what?
Okay, I think we're good.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, that answered my question.
On that note, I'm all
I can ask
set.
her any more questions after.
Run while you can.
Yes, I
No more
am.
trick questions.
Thank you.
Seriously, sorry, I didn't.
Okay, Registrar of Voters, 2829.
Madam
Chris, do you
Mayor,
want to start with? Yeah.
excuse me,
Guess what's
Madam Mayor,
coming.
since my husband is registrar, I'm going
I'll
to
mention what happened.
leave the room, so somebody come get me when we're done with registrar, please.
I'm telling you.
Before,
Mimi, you're recusing yourself?
Yes, I am.
I was gonna say
You should have a revised
Yeah,
update.
well, I'd say an updated
Registrar of
page.
Voters that was handed out, that's different than the one in the book.
Okay.
We should be working off of the one that was handed out. And that one does show some increases in their budget. So I think this is Phil and your first budget rodeo.
Yes, it
So-
is our first
So
budget
good luck.
rodeo.
And,
No, it's your second, isn't it?
Nope, first.
Get ready for the trick questions.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, this year's election is going to be statewide, and some congressional seats are being opened too. So we're also looking at the distinct possibility of primaries. So our requested budget for this year is about $23,000 higher than last year. Some of that is several years ago, the town council approved raises for the 2 registrars and the 2 deputy registrars, so that was reflected in the part-time salaries. The election workers' salaries obviously are going to increase because minimum wage has gone up, and we're going to need more workers because of the primaries. Equipment repair has increased because the maintenance contracts have gone up on our equipment. And of course, you guys added the telephone and photocopier line. Our postage has gone up a little bit. Our printing has gone up. The cost of paper, they told us to at least include a 10% increase just for the cost of paper. So and of course, we're responsible for having all of the ballots printed. So that cost has gone up. Technical supplies, training for moderators and election workers, that there's going to be more training sessions again because there's going to be primaries and the election. So that cost is that partially accounts for the cost going up in that. Food has gone down. Tom has done a great job with getting food for our workers, and he was able to get some contracts with some local food companies and keep the cost down. Member expenses have gone up. That includes, of course, conferences that we need to go to and different things like that. And I guess that pretty much explains the increases. Are there any questions?
If I may, we tried to keep this a very tight budget from our department, but you know the elections are cyclical, and this is going to be a bigger election. I wish they could all be as gentle as the last election. Here we are. Thank you. Any questions?
I'm not following the fees for election workers. My apologies. So it says 24,000, right? And you mentioned that you're adding more money to this budget, anticipating primaries.
Yes.
It says we have budgeted for any primary referendum. Oh,
Their updated sheet.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong one. So, oh no, I have it right here.
the other side.
So their
But you're
fees
still
cover the
budgeting
poll
seven.
workers that work from 7 to 7, 7 to 8, 6 to 8. So that's like
30,
14
30
hours.
Sometimes, yeah.
And all 3 voting places will be open for a primary as well. So they have to,
Correct.
all 3 has to be staffed as well. So that's the key, because you're anticipating one in August for the
August
Senate
9th will be the
and maybe for Larson,
primaries. Yep.
as well as any local.
And it could be both party primaries.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I'm sorry, did we answer your question, Madam Mayor?
He's just trying to figure out, because of the new sheet we got.
Okay.
I'll ask, let me ask a question to meet about that.
No, go ahead.
Is there like a correlation between voter turnout and, like a direct correlation between voter turnout and costs? And if so, is there a much difference in turnout between like a local election versus like 2 years ago where you had, well, it was a national election?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It'll be a bigger turnout in
Bigger
the state election.
And is there like a direct cost?
Problem with us predicting how many voters are going to turn out is we have to go in excess of what we feel.
Right.
Because we can't be caught without ballots.
Right.
Right.
It's that type of thing. But yes, local elections, there's much less turnout. The big turnout is in the presidential election.
Yep, right. So is there direct, is there direct correlation as far as the number of ballots you have to print, I assume?
Correct.
Do you staff up more for like a election when you have, a non-local election, let's say, like this year would be?
No, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I mean, the extra staffing would be in the primaries.
Oh, if there's primaries, okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
And then where does that money go if there are no primaries?
I beg your pardon?
Where does that 17.5?
It returns to the town if we don't have to
You know, it
spend it.
doesn't sit in your budget. Like, you won't.
It doesn't roll.
So if there's no primary, their budget should come in $17,000 over in the positive.
A question about technical supplies, which I think is the right group. There's a note here just about how the costs do change per election, but then also the expenses are previously covered by the state, and now the town is picking it up. And I don't know if you could provide some additional context there, that'd be helpful.
Which one are you looking at, Chris?
God, I hope I'm on the right page. There's a note under technical supplies. It's for it looks like $5,000. It's 5627, and then in the description it mentions there's some things involving memory cards.
Right. Okay. The memory cards are for the tabulators, and every year they have to be cleaned and set up for the next election. Right, and we have how many tabulators for
We have 8.
eight tabulators, so that's 8 memory cards that have to be cleaned and returned to us, ready for the next election.
So it's like programming in the candidates, the different people on the ballot, that type of thing?
Correct.
Okay.
Phil, I think they're referencing that the state used to cover some cost, and now the town has to pick up. Is that related to training, to monitor training?
Yeah,
for
that's
the
related
last
to training,
sentence?
yes.
So in past years, the state would pay for the moderators'
Right.
training.
And
And then they
now-
stopped doing that, and now
It's up
and
to the
then you
towns,
have to
yes.
send, at least 3 people? Is there one moderator at each polling place?
There's one moderator at each polling place and the head moderator.
We have 4 moderators because we also have EDR.
Right.
And
Election
then
day.
the head moderator.
Right.
What is EDR? I just
I'm
asked
sorry,
him, and then you
Day.
said EDR.
Election day
Election day
registration.
registration.
So we both know it.
What is it?
Election day, it's if you want to come in, if
Election day
you're not
registration.
registered to vote, you come in election day. We have a separate room that you go to register.
Okay.
So
That's a
that's gonna be
separate
staffed
ballot?
too. I'm
That's a
sorry.
Separate ballot also.
It's a separate ballot.
Yes.
Yes.
A lot of what we do is driven by the state's, I'd like to say whims, because it changes so often. But the state mandates, so we just have to keep up with those.
I have a question,
Sir?
unrelated but not on the budget item, which is about absentee balloting, right? So, as you know, there is we are going to have sickness, I guess that's what it's called now.
Yes.
Yes.
Exemption,
Yes.
right? How is that going to affect your process?
We just have to send out more absentee ballot.
Well,
so-
that's coordinated with the town clerk's office. They sort of oversee the absentee ballots.
Yes.
So is
and
there
so on.
is
So
there a
that's
cost?
their headache more than their headaches. They do the processing and all that, and then they eventually turn them over to you, and then you guys come up here.
Right,
Right,
we do
right.
the counting
But
and
you have to
auditing
count them
them.
the day after the election? Or you-
Right,
you do it
most of them are
election
the
day?
same day,
You
and the
do it same day?
final word is the day after.
So I think
You're right.
absentees are more associated with the town clerk.
Is there a cost, John, on that side if we, let's say if we go to like absentee without excuse eventually?
Well, most likely, yes, because of the increased number of absentee ballots there. And then you're also going to have the cost associated with time to administer that program as it grows and so on. So that could be an unforeseen cost, but yes, there'll probably be additional costs.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's
but
gonna-
less related to the registrar, more related to the
Right, the
clerk.
registrar sort of sit back and say, when you finish with doing whatever you have, the state requires you to do, give us the vote ballots, and then they do have a group of absentee ballot counters up here.
Yep.
That count it, and it's also incorporated into your reporting to the state as absentee ballots as opposed to
Correct.
District 1, 2, or 3.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope, we're good.
We're
Thank
golden.
you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Just want to
Thanks.
have someone let Mimi back in or let her know we're.
Where did she go?
Moving on to E, Information Technology, pages 34 and 35.
Just might want to give Mimi a second.
Hi, good evening. A few things I'd like to point out in this budget. First of all, we're asking for new servers and storage this year. Our current infrastructure is running 6 years old now, which is pretty much the expected lifespan of servers and storage. Additionally, we're looking for monitoring of critical phone systems. That would be 24/7 monitoring of those systems. So if something were to happen to the phone systems, that affects dispatch as well. So we want to make sure that, if it's a slow night and something's happening to the phone system and they don't necessarily know it right away, we'd get notified before they'd even have a chance to run into an issue. In addition to that, we are continuing our cybersecurity monitoring of all of our end systems and servers, as well as adding in two-factor authentication for critical admin systems as well. Those are the highlights of the current budget. Any questions?
It's not as exciting as like the whole new website and app
You know, I mean,
presentation.
that was exciting,
Yeah.
but this is the stuff that enables us to do our day-to-day functions.
Yeah.
Now, back to the telephones and photocopiers. The bills will still be coming into John centralized to review, but then they're sent up to finance, in which we'll distribute it to the appropriate department. So
Yeah,
the departments aren't reviewing their bills. John is to make sure that everything's flowing correctly and there's no problems there.
Anybody?
We took a pretty big jump for on the technology software line. Is that because something new was rolled in, or did?
Yes, part of that is pull up my list here. So part of that is the backup that was previously not in that line before. It came out of technology services. Technology services jumped up due to the phone monitoring. And there's also the an additional $5,600 for Cisco Duo authentication, that multi-factor auth for all of our admin systems, which is essentially critical. It affects our ability to get cyber insurance.
And then you mentioned the new servers and storage. We're doing that in-house. I think we may have talked about this last year, but what's the thought behind doing it on our side versus going to, Azure or one of the cloud services?
Sure. We could start moving things to Azure, but it's a 5-year plan at this point. So we had a roadblock previously that the state did not have an agreement signed with Microsoft in regards to criminal justice information. They have that now. So now that that's in play, we can start thinking about moving some of our critical infrastructure over there. But I would not go all the way either way. I would stick with a hybrid scenario, simply because cloud vendors do get hacked. They are still prone to an engineer performing an update on a critical router and routes go down. We've seen it with Amazon Web Services. We've seen it with Azure. I think Google's not immune to that as well. So anytime we put one of those systems into play, the single cloud provider, the multi-cloud provider, the hybrid solution, of those three, I think the hybrid solution is best for our needs. It keeps all those critical pieces of infrastructure right where our people are, right? So we're working in this building, so it makes it faster to have it in this building. But, God forbid something should happen, or we get into a scenario again where everybody has to work from home, or something really happens to this building. It's nice to know that with a hybrid solution, we could fail over to the cloud and make it pretty much seamless.
And is that something, and that's good to hear that the things are evolving there. You mentioned a 5-year plan. Is that something that you can accommodate within your existing roadmap and budget, or would that be something that we'd be looking at funding throughout the year? How does that work?
It'd probably be funded through our existing budget. We would be able to, take down the actual size of our on-site infrastructure to a small, not a lot, but size it down a little bit. Have certain, I would see having certain things archived to the cloud long term. Glacier is a beautiful thing, and it's very inexpensive. And then as far as the actual funding of the services, it is a service. So again, I'd see that pretty much being out of our budget.
Thanks.
I have a question about cybersecurity and how are you spending your dollars? How are you allocating your dollars within your budget to, mitigate that threat, I guess? And has it been increasing your allocation within your budget? I know there is not a line item and you don't have to go into details of technical details, but are you more concerned, less concerned, same amount of concern from the last year? Because as we know, like all towns, like small or large, have that threat now. So from a preparedness standpoint, where are you allocating your dollars? Or are you allocating your dollars more? Yeah.
We're allocating our dollars, as I noted in the beginning, we have endpoint monitoring and remediation. So we actually have a company that has a client on all of our machines and our servers, which looks for anomalies. All right, so if anything happens, I have gotten a phone call at 3 a.m. that says, hey, there's something wrong with your mail server. We'd like to isolate it. So we did, right? And that was before anybody knew that there was a major offensive against the Exchange servers on premise. So we allocate those dollars there. We also allocate it, and when you say cybersecurity, one of our best defenses is actually our backups. So our backups are local and online, and they're decoupled from the actual services. So that way, and we keep multiple versions of the same, of the backups. So that way we, once we isolate, God forbid something should actually rise to the level of a breach or something along those lines, we would actually engage services to to investigate, get to the root cause, make sure that our systems that we restore are actually in a good state. We don't want to just jump to the last backup and restore it because we don't know at that point if the last backup will just reintroduce the vulnerability that got us, in trouble. Not in trouble, but that put us in a bad situation in the first place. So that's why we have multiple layers there. Now, as far as actual funding goes, I could see additional funding in future years, simply because as we start to engage that elastic footprint of ours, right? So when we're no longer just here, we're everywhere. That is naturally going to mean that more devices, more services, different types of virtual machines in the clouds and things like that would have to be protected as well.
Right. Yeah, and that's why that hybrid approach probably works better for you, like in the totality of like what you do now, like the way you're approaching this, I guess. So, all right, cool. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to F, Human and Youth Services. We'll start with Human Services, pages 68 and 69.
Good evening.
Hello.
So, my department's budget looks a little bit different this year. Mostly that reason is because of the senior center split, making it its own department. The major differences, for the most part, it remains the same. I think it goes without saying. We're all very well aware of some of the volatility with what Human Services is up against and sort of some of the changes, whether it be inflation, the mental health, evictions. But one of the biggest changes you will see is for the Human Services page. We are asking for a full-time position, the technical assistant. I know that did come up at a town council meeting a couple months ago, and there was some discussion regarding that. So I'm happy to expound upon that if necessary. However, it really is just the volume of calls that we're getting. It really is everything from response in the community to intakes. So we have walk-ins, we have scheduled intakes. We do have currently contractors helping us from 2 other towns right now, helping us manage just the volume of calls, which has worked out well, but it really is essential from our perspective that we have the full-time help in the office that can just help respond and meet everything from senior needs, whether it be Medicare, renter's rebate, state and federal applications that are all-time high, state of Connecticut evictions, all-time high statistically. Food instability is rising significantly again post-COVID now. There was a lot of funding that came down from state and federal for that. However, with inflation cost, housing shortage is a huge crisis. So most of these things that I'm mentioning are not specific to Rocky Hill. They're across the board, but our staffing is just significantly lower than it needs to be. So that is our priority in order to tackle all of these needs.
Plus you also have the food pantry. Food pantry.
Yep. Yes. In the budget specifically?
Well,
What we're doing, yes.
If I could, and if it's open to questions, I think you've been doing pretty good fundraising-wise. Where does it all out?
That is what we use for housing issues, heating issues. None of that comes out of the general budget. So that,
general budget.
That is all, that money that is raised or donated is used for emergency services. So whether that be heating oil, down payment on rent, a lot of it goes to motel stays. Any resident of Rocky Hill that provides documentation and is in need of help. Cell phone minutes, laundry cards, bus passes, any of those emergency needs for our residents come out of those donated funds.
So do you have a total that you've
It's
you raise
a
year in and year out?
rotating, yes. I mean, certainly Mona, when we ask her, can give us a printout of that, but we are monitoring sort of what comes in and what goes out, but it's a constant rotation of funds that come in and then funds that go out.
Sure.
It's all accounted for.
Yeah, yeah. Is it like 10,000 or 20,000?
Annually?
Yeah.
Last 3 months, it was 15,000. But it ebbs and flows, certainly, but it is ebbing right now.
It's heavy.
All based
And
on
flowing,
need.
Probably.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Just, Melissa, could you just address, since not necessarily as part of your budget, but you haven't asked for another full-time person, how your services are provided outside of the normal workday? Because I know we've talked that you're also assisting on calls with the police department, EMS, and just kind of give us a high level of that.
Sure. So anything to do with human services, certainly within the town hours, we're open and here available to the general public. However, both on Lori's side with youth services as well as my side, that we have emergency services, I think, which you're specifically asking about. So any call that comes in, and I will say a huge shout out to all our emergency management services here in town, because they all do a fantastic job of handling and only calling. A lot of times it can be done on the phone, but they do call out for any mental health assistance they may need. So that could be a psychosocial evaluation, a hoarding situation. If there's a fire in town, people need to be put up. Police departments sometimes can call for any of those reasons, or depending on weather or situation. We have a lot of homeless in the car. So if the state needs to be called, if supplies need to be delivered, those things all take place nights, evenings, whenever, and we respond.
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilor Russell.
Question? So, Melissa, are there any, shall we say, metrics in human resources, perhaps tied to the population in the town or whatever, in terms of the number of full-time personnel or equivalent personnel, for a town like Rocky Hill? Do we have any kind of like measuring rod to compare your asks to other comparable towns as far as your staffing level is concerned?
We do have a binder in the office. Our class, which is all the directors across the state, meet once a month to discuss all of the issues, staffing issues, and up-and-coming struggles or successes. We share a lot of data and suggestions with each other. Statistically, we have a binder, and it has the surrounding 10 towns, I think we evaluated last year, regarding staffing. It's hard to give you a very black and white ratio, because some departments include services differently than others, so they're organized a little differently. However, almost all of our surrounding towns have, ratio-wise, significantly more staffing in the office. Now, I say that Rocky Hill offers, both Lori and I offer clinical services on an emergency basis, so that's short-term. Most other towns do not offer that. So Rocky Hill, despite some staffing issues, does offer services that most of our other surrounding towns do not offer. So it's very hard to give you a direct correlation, because it's not a one-for-one. It's depending on services. But staffing-wise, I can't answer for you and you services, but there is more staffing. Newington, Weathersfield, Cromwell all have a minimum of 3 case managers and staff people to meet with underneath administrative in their departments. Glastonbury, but Glastonbury is much bigger.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to add, on the youth services side, I'm part of the Connecticut Youth Services Association, and Rocky Hill's ratio of staff to students is very low in comparison to most around the state.
You mentioned that you're currently using contractors from some other towns to manage the call volume, and that's one of the reasons why the technical assistant is is in the budget and being useful. Could you kind of explain, I guess, how, in addition to those contractors, other people might be picking up extra work to, I guess, help create the need for that position?
I'm not sure I understand your question. How are our contractors?
But yeah, by not having someone in that role there now, what's the impact to the team in terms of other people picking up those duties or having to engage folks like those contractors?
The impact on us as a staff, I think you're asking.
Yeah, and the folks that we serve as well.
Oh, well, that's a good question. So we have a really good system going. The two contractors that we're utilizing are from surrounding towns in the same social services, so there was no need for training, thank goodness. They jumped right in. So that was a very smooth transition, and we've been able to schedule some of what we're considering the non-priority. So if it can wait a few days, if it's a Medicare registration, if it's filing, or they got a redetermination letter for services that they're getting, and the deadline is a month out, we're able to schedule them within that week. So we have each contractor coming in once a week right now, and we're able to, in that small block of time, schedule that. The impact, I would like to proudly say, is minimal on the community because we have met all needs. It does not go unanswered. We're pretty tired.
Yeah.
We're tired, but I think that in the field of human services, you do more with less. That is what we've done since pre-degrees, pre everything. I mean, and it's part of the career field because it does constantly ebb and flow. So it's part of what we do, and there are times where it quiets down. There's so many variables. It's the weather. It's the economic situation. It's the whether or not there's a pandemic. There's a lot of different factors. But I would say we have met all the needs that we have been asked. Therefore, I think minimal at this point, except for some residents being asked to wait a few days, and that has not been an issue. We have met the needs.
And how in hearing a smaller staff than maybe our surrounding towns continuing to meet the needs and growing demands, particularly during the pandemic, how close are folks to burning out?
We're past. I'm being a little facetious. It happens. It happens in mental health. It happens in, when you're in the field, and I will not advocate on behalf of staffing because it's an exhausting pace, and it's really good work, and it's very fulfilling. So this is certainly not a sob story, but my staff works very hard in long hours and even weekends, things that we are trying to promote. And with that, I should say, we spend a lot of time evaluating the overall needs, such as, let me give you a perfect example, grief and loss counseling right now. All mental health therapists are 3 and 4 months booked out. Lori and I, being licensed in the state of Connecticut, are contacted personally on an ongoing basis to please pick up cases outside of here. So that's the case for all mental health workers. However, we would love to start that group. We would love to, I know that's a big one statewide to try to tackle, so we can get people off the wait list. And I know Gina from the Senior Center has approached us about that. So even being a little bit proactive about some of the needs versus constant survival mode, I think that's, so, when you say burnout, we are doing our jobs, and I think doing it very well, but we are constantly just treading water. And I think it's important that we look a little forward too and be a little proactive about what we can be doing to get ahead of this, because it will be a vicious cycle of constant needs.
Thanks. I had a quick question. So just with what you're saying, there's some work using contractors from other towns. Are there expenses related directly to that we're paying these other contractors? So are those, where do those show up? So are those expenses going to go down that we hire somebody, then those expenses will, so it's a kind of an offset to some extent, or? Certainly,
yes. So if we hire somebody, we won't need the contractor services. So Mona would have to clarify exactly. I think it's off our part-time line right now that she's paying that out of, but yes.
Okay. Is that factored in, is that reduction factored into this budget for the part-time line, or?
Yes, actually, well, if you didn't mind, we factored in the reduction, but we also picked up that portion that we were putting in from the ARPA funds, because we had allocated from ARPA the 50,000 for them. So although the increase went in for about 22,000 into her part-time, we also had an offsetting reduction in what she would be doing by not using the consultants and the part-timers,
Right.
by taking on a full-time. So if the full-time didn't go in, you'd have to see an offset increase on part-time.
Great, okay. So we should keep in mind that if we add that, it's actually not the full brunt of that 66,000 because there's some expenses we'll be reducing by bringing that person on. Is that a fair statement? Or?
Correct.
Okay. Maybe just talk about, and I think you've probably experienced some of the challenges in trying to hire somebody in a position such as this, so we understand what's involved.
Dana, still here, huge shout out to HR who's pulling their hair out with us. So again, that's not Rocky Hill specific. It is across the board. As people are going back to work post-pandemic, first of all, in mental health and any human services field, there is more work than people can get. So it's become slim pickings right off the bat. We have had for a few months posted some part-time positions. We have just finally started getting a couple of resumes in, so we're looking forward to conducting some more interviews and hopefully making decision on those soon. But people are looking for full-time work primarily, and it has been very, very challenging for us to try to get somebody in there because there are so many opportunities and so much need in this field right now across the board that we're really finding, and our peers are saying the same, that people are, and post-pandemic, if they were laid off, if they were at home, people are looking for full-time work with benefits. And so up until this point, we were asking for part-time and having a very difficult time. We also, very much like teachers in this field, the other part of the challenge is the burnout rate post-pandemic, right? So the pandemic went on much longer than most people expected it to. And so those who have been essential workers and in the trenches are opting out to take a break. And so that has impacted the ability to hire qualified people to jump in and take on sort of a big job with a big range. And a lot of these jobs per se are non-for-profit organizations in the community, which is a little bit more specific. In a municipality, we're sort of prepared for anything. It could be in the office, outside of the office, any age group, any sort of need, ranging from food instability to medical equipment to a mental health crisis. And so it's a big job.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
So along the same line, what are the skill set requirement for that individual, those types of individuals, and like how many licenses do they have to come with? And
so
I imagine they're fairly professional.
Yes.
I mean,
they are. So a social worker is an undergraduate degree, bachelor's degree, which is what we are asking for in the full-time position here. Master's degree is certainly preferred. And a master's level clinician can offer overall counseling. And then in order to provide psychosocial evaluations or therapy, then you have to be a licensed therapist. Lori and I are qualified to do that, and as a licensed therapist, she and I can oversee either master's level or a bachelor level in the office. So that is our intention. So obviously the salary goes up from there. So again, we're very blessed and lucky to have the clinical services that we don't just refer out. We provide those. Lori primarily sees the kids from the schools, so the schools send referrals, and she gets family and youth, and I see mostly the adults in town. That's how we primarily split it up.
I mean, so I'm getting a sense that it would be rather difficult to just train up a couple people.
Yeah, well, it's not
put
easy.
them in
yeah.
the spot. I mean,
right.
they need like about 7 years of secondary education and degrees and a license. Okay.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's not necessarily what we're asking for. To get to this level, yes, but we're looking for at least bachelor, if not master level, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, we'll move on to F2, Youth Services, pages 70 and 71.
Okay, so on youth services, you'll see the part-time line. That is part of the ARPA funds that Mayor approved with the town council a few months ago. It's on the website, and we are trying very hard to get youth services specific. Lori continues to run Cops and Kids, her coalition, prevention programs in the school.
The Juvenile Review Board.
Yep, Juvenile Review Board. Those have all remained, and that sort of expounds upon the question as well. We have continued, and she has continued those programs along with some intergenerational programming, but Lori's a one-man show in youth services, so this too for us is critical. There are times where your coalition has 55 or so kids in it right now, and it's concerning. So we all are aware when she has kids in the room, but it's weekends. I know drug take back is coming up. There's just a lot of programming, and so to have one adult overseeing, they're older kids, and they're all great, but certainly just for basic safety factor planning, and we talked about responding, but some of those things that we do on nights and weekends and groups and for the kids are all extra hours as well, on top of our training and our CEUs and all of that. So it is very, very difficult for her to continue to do that with one person. And though we hope you stay forever as well, inevitably, it's important. A lot of youth services is state mandated as well and grant funded. So a lot of what she does is not an option for the town to have. It's not just a nicety, it's required. It's very involved with boards and commissions, the Board of Education. So really, it's imperative that we get somebody at least part-time, if not inevitably full-time, to sort of get on board and be involved with that as well as a backup and to sort of work up. The other, only other increase on youth services page you'll see is the DEMIS grant, 5810 on the bottom. That is a matching grant, and the state offered more funding, and therefore our matching is a little bit higher, but that's a standard every year. It's a matching fund that she runs programs off of.
And DEMIS gave us additional funding toward mental health because they know it's a crisis and we're going to need a little more funding for that purpose.
I can tell you so I'm on a CCM task force called Violent Crime Recidivism and Community Outreach, and some of the recommendations we've made recently to state lawmakers, and we continue to have the conversation, is support for departments like yours, specifically for mental health workers and juvenile review boards. And I know that there should be some money coming from the state once, this session is over, and hopefully, I don't know how that will be allocated, but hopefully that will come to us too, and that would be another benefit for your department.
Well, thank you for advocating. We appreciate it.
All right, anyone else?
What would be the education or the qualifications for the program assistant? What would you specifically be looking for?
We're looking again for a bachelor's level position. It's difficult to find a part-time person, but we're going to keep trying to get somebody who has the skill set that we really need to work with youth and families and to work alongside.
What would the degree be in?
Excuse me?
What would the degree be in, education or social work?
It would have to be somewhere in the psych field so that they could understand what we do as a department and kind of jump in and help us with what we have.
Could be human services as well. So human services, sociology, human development studies is a different degree. So any of those factors where things like HIPAA, personalities, basic mental health, any of those are covered.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything new I was thinking it might be under the educational awareness, but anything new in terms of social media, like deprogramming, I guess for lack of a better term, but we're becoming more aware of the negative impacts of especially youth being on social media. Any new things that you need to pursue there to help stay on ahead of that? Because it seems like we know it's negative, but I don't know if there's intervention programs that are out there yet that we might need to take a look at, either accommodating within your existing budget or perhaps through a grant or another funding source.
We actually partner with the 4 towns surrounding us, and we all put grant money toward that effort. We actually have coming up this weekend a conference that will include media TikTok, all the influences of drug, alcohol, marijuana, vaping. So that is coming up this weekend, and the 4 towns are bringing folks together as well as youth to go into breakout sessions to do some of those seminars and learn more about those topics.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Melissa, what's the crossover between youth services versus what the Board of Education offers on their side of the, side may not be the right word, but.
You know, well, so Lori takes in youth services, I'll let you expound upon this, but in layman terms, youth services, youth and family services is the human services component of the state's mandates and funds. So it's a lot of prevention work. It happens to cross over and correlate a lot because it's school-aged children that we're targeting and getting that audience. And so a lot of the referrals. So if this school certainly is staffed with their own, you know, counselors and some mental health staff, but the volume of kids, and typically, you know, like most of us are aware, school is a very safe place where a lot of kids are fed a nutritious meal, have a safe adult to talk to. However, within the school, their focus is the imminent safety and the education of that child. Where our department sort of steps in is the overlap of that. So the school utilizes our department for referrals. For instance, if there is a family who socioeconomically is really struggling but hasn't stepped forward, the child may or may not be coming to school with behaviors that are surfacing, in need of clothing. They pull the parent aside, the referral comes to us. We determine there's maybe a need to get other agencies involved, maybe not, set up resources within the home. So we sort of do a lot of the case management and pair with the school because the school identifies what the need is, but they're sort of outside of anything that impacts the educational needs and what they can tackle in the school. We sort of help overlap, build rapport, and then take over for the family home life. Is that?
So I talk to the school on a daily basis. I get referrals on a daily basis. They do not do family counseling through the schools, so that would be our area of expertise. Right now, I do not have a single after-school time slot available because of the wait lists that are out there in private sector. So we are picking up the slack of the community that can't really see these kids and families that are in crisis. A lot of our students are coming through our JRB because they are not going to school. They're truant. We have gone to children's houses to wake them up, to get up, to go to school because they are so anxious and so depressed.
It's another thing we do outside of.
Yeah, this is another thing outside of the office. So we are there. We are the go-to people that, you know, in a pinch can go and help out wherever we can. So we are doing a lot of that right now. Kids are really struggling, and their parents are too.
We should probably clarify that was in conjunction with the SRO officers.
Yes.
And it's parenting skills. We're not dragging children out of bed.
No. No, we're assisting. But we're a team. We work with the schools very closely. I'm on the TIP team. I'm on the crisis team. So we talk to them on a daily basis. So it's a good system that we have set up.
And Nicole, who helps field all of that and keep us all in line. So when we say team, it is.
Yeah.
We're all.
Question.
Sure.
So concerning the challenge of filling part-time positions, and we've been hearing about that, you know, for years and from a variety of departments, and we know it's an issue. Is it an option to compare notes with other neighboring towns that also may be looking for a full-time position and to attempt, you know, a sort of regionalization type approach where you can have a full-time person who divides their time between Rocky Hill and another town?
That has not come up per se. It certainly is a topic that I'm willing to bring up. I'm willing to consider anything. I think for the structured activities and the groups, that would be important and certainly potentially successful. That becomes very difficult throughout the day with the in the moment phone calls, the crisis responses, and that's where a lot of the challenge comes in across the board in our department, because certainly we do have some days where we can catch up on emails and administrative work, but in a moment's notice, we can literally run for hours straight and hardly stop, or catch up on email. It's just very unpredictable. Everything, for anything that is not scheduled, and the vast majority is walk-ins, call-outs, any of those things. So it's certainly something we can discuss and look into, and I think for a lot of summer programs potentially, or the coalition things, that could work, and we're more than willing to put it out there. It's a good suggestion. I appreciate it.
So, Bill, I think, we're talking about that in public safety, and we keep asking our central health district about that. In other words, would our health district become that regionalized office spot for one or two clinicians to handle all the towns, Rocky Hill, Weathersfield, Berlin, Newington? I don't think we've had much response back on that. Isn't that being looked at with the health district or not?
I certainly don't want to speak for Charles Brown.
Yep.
I know that there was some concern about some of the challenges in that. So mobile crisis, which is essentially that program, our local one out of East Hartford, out of Intercommunity, is who covers the Rocky Hill area. So conceptually, that works. Once you get past some of the challenges that have been is the turnover. Typically that job is very young, right out of school, non-licensed, so it requires a supervisor's overseeing that. The time challenge, so once you regionalize, if the office is here, go into the other end of Newington or whatnot, a lot of those crises are in the moment. So when we say crisis, we're talking an imminent either danger, so ambulance has been called, police have been responded, and they're looking for validation that there is a necessary need for a hospitalization visit. So the time factor becomes challenging. There certainly are some calls overnight, but that sometimes is difficult to fund for a licensed therapist at that salary overnight or weekends when it may or may not be busy. So those are some of the things that were expressed to me after the meeting, but certainly there was a discussion about what can we do and what can we look into for our specific area.
I think we're struggling with it too, in the sense of where are we going to find this resource for you, and we're investigating all possible places to house the resource or to fund the resource, and and it's been an ongoing discussion in public safety for the last 3 months for sure, not longer.
I have to say, it sounds more like an in-house issue, though. It sounds like having someone in-house is definitely the more practical way to go, and I kind of get that sense not just from your presentation, but again from the task force that I'm on, because when we were talking about social workers, Bill, something came up about potentially regionalizing, and then it's well, where do you house them? I think that was one of Charlie's concerns, and then it gets a little complicated. So I know that some of the mayors who are on this task force everyone's going to get their information about programs that they've been doing and what new innovative ideas they have in their departments and what they're trying to create, and put all that together so that we can share it, at council levels. But overall, it seems like, that the answer is an in-house infusion of resources.
I also and so I think for those who are not aware, another really unique thing about human services is that it is very rare that we respond and then don't continue to service that family or that client in numerous capacities for a significant amount of time. So many of our seniors, now we're a relatively small community, so a lot of the seniors that are in the senior center, we know their name. We know every year. Nicole can tell you by the name of somebody that they apply for a certain program every year, and she pulls the file. We know adult children that may call us and their parent is struggling, and we do home visits. So there is a very human factor. And when you engage with a family, with a client, when we have a referral from the school and Lori knows their children, but we may be servicing the parents and helping that. So there is a real personal connection and importance, especially in a small community. And certainly I understand trying to regionalize and look at an effective plan, but there also is a human capacity that we lose when we have a regionalized plan where people can respond in the moment, but if there's no connection, both for our residents as well as the workers who are not familiar with the faces or know what they're there for. And so I think, is one of the best parts of our job in this community is that we sort of see it to fruition and can offer from all angles to really service people who have been here and want to remain here, and several generations in many cases. So that's an important part to just take into consideration with that.
And this may sound reductive, but it sounds like you really need a human in the human services, and we wouldn't be able to augment with something like extra hotlines or different services or apps. Maybe not the right fit for things like Better Health or some other offerings.
You mean
that are
like
out there.
a telehealth?
Yeah, like sounds like you would really need to have, just to serve your audience, have a person there to build that relationship.
And face-to-face via Zoom is not really great therapy or service prevention.
Groups is more what we were trying to get, and even just having that person, if we could offer, a group twice a week where at least we could take that wait list or say to those who may have lost family members to COVID or want to start rebuilding, or things that we could offer on a group basis but still have that personal connection in town, even that extra body, so that we can start to put some skill set and some positive things out there instead of just, crisis response, which is in the mode that we're all in right now in the field.
I know, just before we belabor this issue, but I know too that one of the issues that I heard repeatedly, in my other groups was that it's the follow-up too, right? And so maybe you do see people for years or families for years, and maybe you don't, but follow-up in and of itself, I know a lot of municipalities aren't even capable of doing that because they're so short-staffed. And so just having that person who is the follow-up person, so you're engaging in the immediate emergency, perhaps is beneficial.
And the person within towns. Because I can tell you with emergency response, fire department, police department, and ambulance, they all know us very well. They will send a referral. They know that we know the case. We can wrap around if the Red Cross gets involved. We all get the email. So we're really, it's one of the huge strengths of our town here in our community is that there's a lot of communication within departments and group work, and they all do an amazing job at that. So that is part of the person that is assigned and knows the community as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Moving on to fire, we'll begin with 1, supervision, pages 46 and 47.
That's a tough act to follow. Thanks for having us here tonight, and pretty primo time slot. I have with me Assistant Chief Cromus, and behind us is Deputy Chief Stevens. So I just want to take a couple minutes to outline our budget process and some of the items you might have seen in the 4 pages. We begin the budget process with a needs assessment involving the supervisors from each station. Once we receive their information, the staff then reviews the results with a focus on interoperability throughout the department as well as standardization. We really get into the weeds on standardization right down to individual hose loads. We have policies on that, tool locations, and gear. During our review, we really focus on what is needed to fulfill the mission. We focus on the must-haves versus the I wants. And then when we put it all together, we go and have a town manager and finance review with the results of our proposed budget. As you can see, we've had a few increases this year, and I'll just hit a couple of them. In our 01 page, supervision page, in our support services, we've requested an outside vendor to create an unbiased 5-year strategic plan for the department. Obviously, this will help with future planning, help us provide a better service to the town as the town grows, and it's also going to help with succession planning. On our 05 page, it's called fees, but it's our health and safety account. The cost of our yearly fit-for-duty physicals has increased. We've also mandated increased cancer screening, including a biannual chest x-ray. In our under 05 again, in our equipment and supplies account, you'll see an increase to replace an additional rescue tool. A few months ago, we reported through the Public Safety Committee that 2 of our rescue tools, one on engine 1 and one on engine 2, did not pass their yearly factory rep inspection. They're obsolete, no longer serviceable, and we can't get parts for them. They're still running. Something happens, they're done. Also on 05 and...
Chief, can I just interrupt you for a second? Can we just go once, you're taking all 4 sections and combining them?
I was just doing an opening statement, Al, and
Okay,
then I'm almost done, but I can
looking
stop
around
now.
and I was ladies, I know 6 now, and
The last thing I wanted to do was to start off with confusion, so if you want, I could stop right now. Stop it. You got it, Mayor.
One page at a time.
We're not really good with numbers like that. We're just-
some of us could follow it, and some of us can't.
I can get up and leave? All right.
You were almost there.
I need a basic.
You were gonna touch base before you closed up on the transmitter? Like a preview?
You know, believe it or not, that was in one of my next lines.
All right, go ahead.
Okay,
We don't want to
I'll just finish that one. We talked about,
I know, right.
we did talk about the rescue tools. They're becoming obsolete. We also have a couple of fire frequency base radio transmitters that are obsolete. They're in the CIP budget, and I'm sure we'll be talking about them in the next week or so. And the plan on that is there's 2 transmitters to replace one year and one the following budget year, and to spread that cost out a little bit and spread that hit out just a wee bit. So
I thought the plan was we're gonna budget some money for this year, and then we're gonna budget some for the next budget year, and then replace it next July.
Right.
That's the plan.
Yes. Okay.
But
And if I said
guess
it
it's
wrong, I
more-
apologize.
It's an analog system that needs to be upgraded into a digital
Yes, correct.
system, and it's
Yes,
20 years old, and it's,
Yeah, they're legacy transmitter repeaters, and it's just that we've got parts right now, but if we were to have to, continually replace the parts, we're gonna end up buying things on eBay and stuff like that. It's just, you can't get the parts for these anymore. They're legacy, they're,
okay,
10,
Mike,
12,
now
15
go
years
to
old.
supervision budget.
Okay, yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
I stand ready at this point to answer questions.
Okay.
I'll ask, on the supervisory budget, did we fill the part-time or the full-time clerical position?
The full-time clerical is filled, Joanne.
Oh, okay.
And the part-time, we've requested 0 this year.
Gotcha. Okay.
But we
But-
didn't fill that position with theoretically that money that's in part-time has been transferred over to standby and.
Over to
fire.
pay-per-call, and that'll be on the 05 page,
We
under
didn't fill that part-time
part-time.
position.
That was what, 28,000 from last year?
No, it's half of that.
Half.
14,
Right.
14,850.
I'm waiting for them.
So Chief, you didn't have any photocopier, my favorite item, last year.
We left it out special for you, Council.
5550?
Well, nobody did.
No,
No, that's
what
a
we're
photocopier
talking
thing.
about.
That's because it was all
It was
Yes.
all
Right.
schooled
19
in, so.
Now we're
So
breaking
everybody's
it up.
gonna
Oh,
show
we have-
the, like,
okay.
We have 3 new items in the budget, the photocopier,
Cell phones.
cell phones,
Cell phones,
as well
yes, I
as,
saw it. Okay.
fuel, fuel, and one of the.
on the
Thank you.
last page is fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I caught up now.
For the consultant item, I don't know if this question may be more for John or Mona. Is that something that we could get reimbursed from or paid for through ARPA instead of our budget?
I defer taking the West Haven approach on answering that question. If we can, Mona will reimburse it. If we can't, if she reimburses it, then she will be brought to court.
Yeah, I mean, I
But,
would think.
But
Yeah.
there's a point where that we can't reimburse everything through ARPA. We might be able to, due to budgeting constraint, if it's part of the budgeting process, right? So there's a good.
Right, if it was removed from this and then you allocated it as we have in the past, you know, as something that you want to do with ARPA funds. However, as we created this budget, we put a portion, that 1.4 million, as a source of funding as ARPA. So in a sense, there are several items within the budget that are being funded by ARPA, just as having that piece coming in as a source of revenue in the general budget.
Yeah, because this would seem to fall under the, developing a strategic plan for emergency services would seem to fall under the intention of that program, perhaps less so than some of our friends in other towns have come up with. Thank you.
All right.
We're just doing supervision right now.
We're just, we're just going through supervision.
Yeah.
Are we all set with supervision? We can move over to prevention? Okay, let's move to prevention, pages 48 and 49.
Numbers are going down, sorry.
Anything you want to point out here?
Just a small decrease on the page, but no, not really.
Firefighting, 50 and 51.
Mike, I do have a question here for you, and I think we've asked this question in prior years too. Your turnout gear.
Yes.
I know that right now we barely used any of the budget. Is that there's some kind of timing issue with when you're able to get it, when you're able to do measurements, or?
I have an answer for you, Alan.
I think you did last year too, but I did.
Yeah, we have 2 orders in.
Okay.
And COVID and the supply chain has really slowed down.
I think you
what
said enough
was-
of supply chain.
Yeah. It used to
Makes
be a
sense.
90-day thing.
Yeah.
So the first shipment's on its way, the second shipment's due in July.
Okay.
We were talking earlier, we will be buying in August and just waiting the next 11 months and doing it a little differently next year.
Okay. I knew in the past we had something, same kind of thing. I think it was a measurement issue or a timing, but I couldn't remember what it was. Supply chain, I think everybody's having that in all areas.
A lot of that going on.
Yeah.
So the equipment and supplies, we didn't fully fund that last time? Is that what that?
No, Mayor, that was fully funded last time. However, when we factory tested the Hearst rescue tools, 2 of them and I have the reports right here, came up as being obsolete and parts unavailable.
Oh.
They're still on the line, but if we do have an issue with them, they're done.
Okay.
So we're looking to replace those two.
Okay. Anybody? All right, and then apparatus and maintenance is on 52 and 53.
I know the fuel line's a new line this year, but do you have a ballpark idea? I imagine with gas prices and stuff that it is higher than what it would have been in this line last year if it was allocated directly to you guys.
To be truthful, Jeff, we never tracked that. That came out of the highway department's budget.
Yeah.
I understand they did provide this number, but I really don't have an answer for you on that
Yeah.
one.
Your diesel fuel?
Yeah,
primarily?
the capital apparatus is diesel, the support vehicles are gasoline.
Yeah,
And
diesel's
there's
way
a-
up.
Yeah, there is a factor of an increase built in there, but as the rates are still continuing to grow, I think as we go forward, we may want to adjust it upward again, so that the volume of usage is accurate, but I think the price is still looking like it could go upward. So it's, as we're watching it continue to grow at this point in time, when we're at the beginning of March, obviously, there's probably a need to increase this number before the adoption.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
The support vehicles are like pickup trucks and stuff.
Yeah, we have 3 utility trucks, one in each fire station. We have a fire marshal's vehicle, deputy fire marshal, fire chief's vehicle, and we have a vehicle for the full-time mechanic, and we have 1 training car that when the members go out to training at night, that's what they take at night.
So I'm going to ask a question, because Ray and I went to a very long conference today with CBIA on sort of the Connecticut economy. And there's always this push for electric vehicles, but what we were told is our grid really can't support a big push for electric vehicles. It would have to be over at least a 5-year period, or else we'd need a new grid. But one of the things that they said is equally efficient is using propane, which I didn't know, in vehicles. And because it's clean and less expensive, it does leave a bit of a carbon footprint. But while you're looking to transition your vehicles, to consider transitioning to this propane, I didn't know, is that something that you've ever considered, or would that work as a pilot in anywhere?
We would really have to look into that, Mayor. A lot of these vehicles have towing capacities whether we're moving a hazardous materials trailer, the lighting trailer, or whatever it might be, one of the fire department boats or one of the town boats, whatever it might be. So I would really want to look at that to see whether we still have the same performance out of there. And then we'd have to look at the infrastructure, whether the town garage can still supply that for us.
Yep.
Mona, John, just one, I'm assuming that on the revenue side of the budget, we did not put anything in there accounting for the potential reimbursement from the state for calls on the highway.
Not yet, no.
Okay.
No,
And if
but-
we did, it would go as a special revenue, which would probably have a special purpose. So if anything, that revenue would go in a separate account and probably used for purposes that the fire department may need, perhaps your transmitter in year 2 or something to that effect, depending on what the qualifications are.
That was the agreement.
That was his plan.
Budget for it this year, and then anything, if that money
I remember
passes
that,
through.
John. I remember that.
The money went through. Oh, you good, you stayed awake after that, our session, good.
I did.
You know, and now's a good time for us to thank you again for all the help in getting us to that point. With that fund getting refunded, it was great news last week that it got moved out of committee, now it's a vote. So with the amount of times we're up on the highway, that's a substantial amount of money coming back to the town.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not a done deal yet, as we know, but, I mean, $750 per truck company, 2 companies, times
We
20
send 3
events, there's
companies
30
up
grand.
there. Yeah, based on 1 company, with last year's call volume, it's just shy of $69,000.
Oh, there you go.
So
little
it's a
bit
good
helps.
number.
You could pay your gas bill.
We'll make it easy.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the town council budget, pages 10 and 11.
There's nothing on it. There's nothing on it.
Nobody else's turn.
Increasing your meal budget?
Right now, I could go for that.
No, I believe all the associations the town belongs to, CCM cost, and CROG stayed the same. There's no increase there. There was an increase in there for fees for the town council for any expenses they want to, any events they want to have, they have money to cover those expenses. In the past, it was related to the Memorial Day Parade and the new diversification one, but I think you were asking for a lot of money that's going to take them a while to buy a lot of stuff there. And then there's some additional funding in there to get it up to $6,000. Oh, wait, I'm looking at the wrong page.
Secondary flagpole.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to town manager, pages 12 and 13.
Town managers pretty much stayed the same. It incorporated the emergency manager director position, as well as costs associated with that, which is primarily doing with training and memberships to various organizations that associated with emergency management.
That's pretty straightforward. Moving on to subsection J, finance accounting, pages 16 and 17.
Okay, for finance, we did have one large increase, and that was in the technology software. And in our finance office, we are a staff of 4, and we're trying to move toward automation. We're proud that we'd say we've got 5% only of paper paychecks. Did you like that one? That's good. And we are hopefully moving more so in that direction for our payables as well. But at this point, our financial system is met its end of its useful life as of this past December. So it was the last opportunity to run W-2s and 1099s on an old paper form. So we need to actually force to go to an upgrade. We're scheduled to go for our upgrade around January will be the live date, but we're going to go around November. So this is a large expense initially as an increase, but for the most part, that's going to be just the initial purchase, training, install, and then the following year, that will drop about $12,000. So it's the initial spike, but this is definitely a needed upgrade. We'll start seeing more of our financial software being able to export a lot of our programs to Excel and Word, which we really don't have in a lot of our aspects. Hopefully uploading invoices and attaching it into the files rather than taking copies. When the auditors come in, they'll see invoices there rather than going to the drawer and having copies of them and so forth. So it's a major upgrade for us, but it's definitely a needed upgrade. So other than that, we don't have any large changes in the department. So that's it for our department.
So you'll be moving up into the modern times?
We are.
Beyond
We are.
that,
We've been trying so hard to move to the modern time with a bit of an older system, and we're proud of that. But I think with this, we're really going to get up there.
I'm making an assumption Munis is the top program for municipalities?
It is. It
Okay.
is for most towns, and it'll just be a newer version of Munis. You know, where it's, we're at version 11, and now they'll get us into, it's more of a dashboard. We're on the cloud, so it's a good system.
Munis is the one that is acquiring other systems.
Okay.
And they're getting bigger and reducing competition quite a bit. So I think the Board of Ed was on a different system.
Right, it's
and then
Tyler.
years ago,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden Munis bought that platform. So technically, the Board of Ed's on Munis as well, but maybe a different version. So when you say Munis, it probably incorporates a lot of former independent software.
But you bring up an interesting point. Is there any compatibility between what the Board of Ed's doing and what the town's doing? I know there's always a lag of at least 30 days on the financial reporting. And if you're on the same platform, maybe that could be even eliminated.
I think ideally, yes. I think there'll be ability to share a file, but they will always have a different accounting system, so they have different chart of accounts and different funds, so they won't always, they really will never actually marry, but there will be probably the ability to transfer the file and upload much quicker.
So you're moving from version 11 of the local software up to the cloud. This is what we're seeing is like a one-time implementation fee. That's the Munis working with us to upgrade all the software.
Correct. Yeah, it'll be training, implementation, and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to subsection K, central services, pages 22 and 23.
All right, on central services, as we've noticed, we're taking a lot of things and we're decentralizing them, but we still have some aspects that we have centralized, and that's what you're finding on this page. The postage, we have one major postage meter, and departments are bringing their mail up, and we're going through one postage meter. We're still doing centralized advertising. Most of this is for advertising of positions, bids, so forth. Any advertising that needs to be done is going through this centralized rather than individual department budgets, as well as the centralized office supplies. This is more on just that the bulk paper that's used for copy machines. Anything more specific goes into the department budget, something that's more unique to their independent departments. But for the most part, this page is going to stay basically stable.
The office equipment says purchasing of time clocks. We have actual time clocks that people will punch into.
Yes, actually, we are, I'm just making leaps and bounds in automation. So we do, he's like, oh, talk about pay clock. So yes, we have purchased 2 pay clocks, one for the Parks Garage and one for the Highway Garage. And that has actually allowed us to import the time into our financial system. So ideally, either we'll go for another time clock of that type or some other, means, but basically we've gone away from a paper punch card. So this is just automating the file and uploading it into the payroll system. So.
Probably a good move.
It is.
Okay, moving on to subsection L, legal, pages 24 and 25.
Yes, as everyone remembered, back in January, we changed town attorneys. We went from Merthyr Kalina to Halloran and Sage. Merthyr Kalina had a retainage agreement with the town where so many hours of work would be done under the retainage and so on. Switching over to Halloran and Sage, they don't do the retainers. They do charge us an hourly rate depending on the person, the job. The job description of the person that's doing the work. So eliminated the retainage and budgeted for 25 hours of legal work a month to come up with that 67.5. Hopefully it's a high number and we stay out of court for the year. And then it just eliminated the retainage. This year this coming June 30th, we're having one union contract expire. Last year we had 2, which included the police, so we had higher monies in the labor attorney account. And hopefully that will be all wrapped up going into next year. So we have a small NAGE custodian account union to negotiate with, and we're already meeting with them, and we may be able to get it settled before the end of the year. And then, of course, hopefully the 80,000 can satisfy our tax appeal cases. We're trying to wind down all these cases that have been out there associated with solar panels. So we're eliminating those through settling out with the people because of the, I believe there is a law change finally that does favor the solar people, as well as being dragged out due to the court system over the past couple of years where cases weren't being tried. So we should be reducing those tax appeal numbers until our next revaluation.
How about the mannequins?
The mannequins still live. Every time I hear we won, we're all set. There's an appeal, and we're back. It was being handled by one attorney, and when our new town attorney took over, I actually asked him, what do you think? And I guess it is a bellwether case out there that other municipalities or attorneys are monitoring that could have an effect on how they're monitored. So I guess we're doing something good for the state of Connecticut. The 168 other towns. should
So
thank us.
can we get a royalty when other towns start charging?
Yes, we should bill them all out and pro rata share of the
Exactly.
legal costs, but it's still going on, and they keep appealing it, and it seems like we always seem to be winning, but we always seem to be
There.
costly.
Okay. And then finally, subsection M, probate, on pages 26 and 27.
Okay. On probate, it's a slight decrease, although the probate court's budget stayed the same amount. That's based on the grand list of the three towns, Newington, Weathersfield, and Rocky Hill. So based on the grand list, we did come out a little bit less in comparison to the other towns. But the budget for probate court remained the same for the upcoming year.
Okay. Great.
Madam Mayor, a motion to adjourn?
A second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.